Hey guys, welcome back. Another chapter of Peter Pan. When we left off last week, Wendy and Michael and John made it to the island. Wendy decided to be their mother, and she told them the end of Cinderella and tucked them in. And Captain Hook had an evil plan to catch them. Let's see what happens. Chapter 8, Something Worse Than Night. It's kind of a long chapter, so I'm going to read half now, and we'll read half tomorrow. The next morning, the darling children were measured for their trees. Hook, if you recall, thought it silly to have one tree for each lost boy, but it actually made a great deal of sense. Each different-sized boy had a door that fit him as perfectly as a tailored suit. This way, they could all enter the cave at once, without having to wait in line. More important, no other body, except for each lost boy's exact body, could fit in that particular tree. This was especially helpful in case of sneak pirate attacks. After a few days' practice, the darling children became very quick and graceful about using their trees. To enter the cave, they sucked in their breath, and down they went at exactly the right speed. To rise, they sucked in and blew out, and so they wiggled up. They also grew to love their new underground home. It was simple and sweet, a bit like camping. Even Wendy stayed there now. It was lonely in her own house, and this felt much more like a real family. The cave was one large cozy room with a floor made of dirt. The boys used mushrooms as chairs and a sawed-off tree trunk as a table. There was one big bed on which all the boys except Michael slept, packed in like sardines in a tin. Because space was so tight, there was a strict rule against turning around until one boy gave the signal, and then everyone had to turn at once. Michael could have slept in the bed too. There's always room in Neverland for one more. But he was the littlest, and Wendy liked to pretend that he was her baby, so she hung him in a basket next to her bed. Her pet wolf, who followed her everywhere, slept on the floor, guarding both of them. Tinkerbell also lived in the cave, in a tiny space carved into the wall, no larger than a birdcage. Over the entrance to her room hung a curtain that she would pull shut when she wanted privacy. Small as it was, Tink's room was the fanciest part of the whole cave, filled with the finest fabrics, soft tiny bedspreads, and delicately carved antique furniture. Your house may be bigger, Tinkerbell informed Wendy, but mine is better. Still, Wendy had bigger concerns than whether Tink's house was better. The boys kept her so busy cooking and cleaning and sewing that weeks would sometimes go by before she left the cave and saw daylight. It makes one long for the old single life, she thought wistfully, as a real grown-up might. As for her parents, she missed them and worried about them, but there was something about Neverland that made time and those worries blur. Somehow, she was confident that the bedroom window in her parents' arms would always remain open for her to fly back into. What did disturb Wendy, however, was the fact that John was starting to forget their parents, and Michael had already forgotten them entirely. He actually thought that she was her real mother. To fix this, Wendy set up a little school with their old life as the subject instead of spelling or math. The other boys wanted to go to school too, so she let them sit in. Of course, they always failed the quizzes, especially the ones with hard questions like what color are mother's eyes and how did we spend last Christmas, and describe father's laugh. Peter never came to school or took a quiz. He said it was because he despised mothers and holidays and even sometimes laughs, but really it was because he couldn't read. While the other boys were in school, Peter would go off alone. Whether he went on real or imaginary adventures, Wendy could never tell, unless she or one of the other boys had also gone. And, with Peter, sometimes not even then. But Wendy had many of her own adventures. We're going to stop right there, and we'll finish the rest of the chapter tomorrow. Maybe we'll hear about some adventures that Wendy, John, Michael, and the Lost Boys and Peter go on. Tune in.